week snowstorm. Tomorrow, FBI Director Comey testifies before the House Intelligence Committee on the Trump campaign's alleged ties to Russia and claims by the president that Barack Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. Joining me here in Washington is the man who will chair that hearing, California Congressman Devin Nunes. Chairman Nunes, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you.
You said earlier this week that you had, your words, no evidence of the Trump claim that he had been wiretapped in Trump Tower by President Obama during the campaign. Then on Friday, you got a response to questions from the FBI on this issue of whether they had any evidence of surveillance there. I know you can't say much about it, but based on what you received from the FBI on Friday, do you want to amend your statement that there's no evidence of wiretapping?
No, so I actually said this a couple weeks ago, that it was, the president doesn't go and physically wiretap something. So if you take the president literally, it didn't happen. I think the concern that we have is that were there any other surveillance activities that were used, unmasking of names? For example, we know that General Flynn's name was unmasked. And so was there a physical wiretap of Trump Tower? No, but there never was. And the information we got on Friday continues to lead us in that direction.
Well, I just want to make that point before there is no evidence that there was any wiretap. I'm not talking about President Obama doing it, but his administration. No evidence of any wiretapping of Trump Tower.
No, there was no FISA warrant that I'm aware of to tap Trump Tower. That's
correct. After you received this information?
That's accurate.
Okay, so then what's your point?
So the other issue, though, that's still remaining out there is the unmasking of names and the leaking of names. And so we have a lot of surveillance activities in this country, and I think the concern that the Trump administration has is, were they actually using surveillance activities to know what they were up to? Because we know that happened with General Flynn. We know that his name was unmasked, and we know that it was leaked out to the press. So the question is, did that happen?
But our understanding of that is that was because you had a regular surveillance, not you, but I mean the government had regular surveillance of the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. What I'm asking you about is something, and I'll get back to the unmasking in a second. There's this whole question of whether there was any surveillance, not wiretapping, but any surveillance at Trump Tower. And I want to play what Donald Trump said this week. Here it is.
We will be submitting certain things, and I will be perhaps speaking about this next week. Wiretap covers a lot of different things. I think you're going to find some very interesting items coming to the forefront over the next 2 weeks.
As I say, we're going to get to the unmasking issue, which is a serious issue in a moment. But do you know what he's talking about? Is there any evidence of any surveillance, electronic surveillance?
Well, if he's talking about the unmasking of names, and so if there were other surveillance activities where names were picked up and then unmasking occurred, and that was spread throughout the intelligence community, that is very possible, and we don't have the answers to those questions yet. I don't know if the president has those or not, but we had a deadline of Friday for the NSA, FBI, and CIA to get us those names that were unmasked through the FISA system. We didn't get those names on Friday, so until we get those names, we can't rule this out.
You're going to have a hearing tomorrow. We've been talking about FBI Director Comey is going to be there. NSA Chief Mike Rogers is going to be there. What do you hope to learn at that hearing?
Well, we're excited about this because for the first time, the American people and all the political parties now are paying attention to the threat that Russia poses. So we're going to highlight that. We'll highlight the fact that we know that the Russians were trying to get involved in our campaign like they have for many decades. They're also trying to get involved in campaigns around the globe and over in Europe. So I think it'll be good to highlight that. Secondly, we're worried about analytical integrity. We don't know how there were information changed and if information changed, because in December, beginning of December, the assessment was that the Russians were trying to get into our election process and cause problems and sow doubt in our system. But then that changed a month later, and it said, no, that they were trying to help Donald Trump. So we need to get to the bottom of that. And then also, whether or not they did try to help Trump, and if any Trump associates or anyone else was involved.
I guess, because there's a little confusion here, it's clear that Michael Flynn's conversations with the Russian ambassador were swept up by electronic intelligence, and as you say, unmasked. Here's the name of an American, and that's illegal, that was leaked to the public. do we believe there was any specific, well, do we know of anybody else other than Mike Flynn who was swept up in this?
Well, you're right to point that out, because the one crime we know that's been committed is that one. The leaking of someone's name through the FISA system, that is a crime that's been committed. We don't know the answer to that. That's what we're trying to get to the bottom of. Were there any other names that were unmasked, leaked, and leaked out? We just don't know that yet.
Do we think there was any surveillance of people in Trump world, or do we think that there was surveillance of other people, like Ambassador Kislyak, and that these folks who were talking to them were incidentally swept up in the conversations, in the intercepts?
Well, if you look at the folks that are working at the White House today that are involved in the Trump administration, I don't think there's any but one there that's under any type of investigation or surveillance activities at all. When you consider, when you look at what happened to General Flynn, it's very, very concerning. This is someone, look. The president had the right to get rid of him. He's not in the administration any longer, but he was an American citizen. He was talking to the Russian ambassador. Talking to diplomats in this town, as you know, Chris, is something that occurs on a regular basis. I probably talk to a dozen diplomats a week. And we should not be going after our diplomats and making them into as if it's wrong to talk to diplomats in this town. That is their job.
I want to ask you, it's a little bit confusing, and I want to try to button this down. Two bottom line questions. First, as the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, as you sit here today before the hearing on March 20th, have you seen any evidence of any collusion between what I'll call Trump world, associates of campaign officials, Trump world and the Russians to swing the 2016 presidential election?
I'll give you a very simple answer. No.
No evidence of any collusion.
No evidence.
And this is after getting this information from the FBI?
Up to speed, everything I have up to this morning. There's no evidence of collusion.
Do you believe that there are elements inside the intelligence community or the FBI that are leaking information, like the name of Mike Flynn, like perhaps the fact that Attorney General Sessions met with the Russian ambassador to undercut the Trump presidency?
I think that's pretty clear. And in fact, I mean, there's
pretty
been several.
Clear what?
It's pretty clear that that's happening. There's even been stories written about it in numerous newspapers talking about how they left breadcrumbs around to hurt the Trump administration.
So you believe that there are people inside these intelligence communities?
I don't think so anymore. I think it was largely people who were there, had classified information, who are now no longer there and decided to leak it.
To what end?
I think to hurt, clearly to leak Michael Flynn's name talking to the Russian ambassador. That was clearly designed to hurt General Flynn and the president's national security advisor.
Do you think this is all going to be cleared up with your hearing tomorrow or not?
Well, this is the beginning. I mean, what we're trying to get to the bottom of, this is just the beginning. Another week from now, a week from Tuesday on the 28th, we have an additional hearing with at least 3 more witnesses. So we're trying to get to everyone who, for lack of a better term, was at the crime scene. And we're trying to bring them all in, see what they knew, when they knew it, if they knew about the leaks, if they knew about General Flynn's name being unmasked. These are all questions that we need to get to the bottom of.
But to make it clear, when you talk about the crime scene, you're talking about the leaking of names of Americans that shouldn't have been leaked as part of our electronic surveillance. You're not talking about anything involving the Trump campaign.
Because that's the only crime that we know has been committed right now. That we know. We know a law has been broken, and we need to get to the bottom of it. As it relates to the Russians, we are happy to investigate it because I think Putin is a bad actor on the world stage.
2 quick questions on other issues. Secretary of State Tillerson has been traveling through the Middle East this week, announcing a change in U.S. policy toward North Korea. Here he is.
Let me be very clear. The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
But while Tillerson is in China, and here's a picture of it, North Korea has just tested a new rocket engine. A couple of questions. How urgent is the threat that North Korea is going to be able to put a nuclear warhead on an ICBM missile that could hit the U.S.? And should we seriously consider the military option, whether it's a strike by the U.S. or getting South Korea and Japan to boost their military capabilities?
The closer that the North Korean regime gets to being able to deliver a nuclear weapon, we're going to have to be in a position to take some type of preemptive strike. We hope that it doesn't come to that, but this is an unhinged regime. You have 20 million people, living in extreme poverty. And so I'm actually very impressed. I've never met the new Secretary of State yet, but I am happy that we're getting off of this strategic patience, which was our last policy towards North Korea. And I think but at the end of the day here, something may have to be done, because we can't afford to let a nuclear weapon go off in Seoul or Tokyo or the United States for that matter.
And briefly, there's a news story today from out of Turkey. In Turkey, they are saying that the Trump administration is considering the extradition of Fethullah Gulen, a Islamic cleric who has been in this country, and Turkey wants to get back. They say he was the architect of the attempted coup against Turkish President Erdogan. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I find that hard to believe. The Erdogan government, he's becoming very authoritarian. NATO for a long time has been a strong ally of ours. But they're becoming more and more worrisome in terms of actually being a reliable ally. And I don't know that we would extradite somebody like that. I haven't seen the evidence for that Gulen was involved in anything like that. If he was, clearly that'd be a different issue. But our relationship with Turkey is strained, and I think it's going to become even more complicated as we begin to try to get ISIS out of Iraq and Syria.
Chairman Nunes, thank you. Thanks for coming in. We covered a lot of territory today. Thank you, sir.